Let me also start to indicate that this is a lesson in science. And so individual contributions and pronouncements made by myself and any other participant of the class cannot attribute it to themselves, but through the spirit of sharing scientific knowledge. We do recognize that some of the discussions in this lesson will be quite sensitive to your religious and cultural perspectives. We do not have any intent to please you by not pointing to scientific evidence, but we are sorry if it does offend you. But we hope that in the spirit of tolerance, we'll be able to have an open mind to a scientific conversation. Once again, let's not mix the science with the religion. And so, straightforward, I just want one person to briefly tell us about the theory of creation or origin of life from the religious point of view. And notice that I'll be very much pleased if I got perspective from all the major religions in the world. And so, you know, major religions or basic Abrahamic religions, you have even the monotheistic religions, you have Islam, you have Christianity, all of them are Abrahamic religions too. I'd like to know your perspectives on creation and origin of life. And then I get to know from polytheistic religions, i.e. African traditional religion and other occultic religions too. If there are other religions like Buddhism and co, I'll be glad to hear from your perspective too. So first, can we look at the Christian point of view? Anybody? How did life arise from the Christian point of view? Okay, so somebody has raised his hand, and I have Akwete Bright Ziwonu. Let's hear from you, right? Right, you may go ahead and speak. Or you did not mean to speak. If Bright is not ready, let's hear from If Bright is not ready, let's hear from Ekuoko Ernest.
Okay, so this is about the creation story according to the Christian point of view. So we Christians, we believe that God is the creator of heaven and earth.
When you say we Christians, what do you mean? Who are they?
Me,
you and your squad.
Most of us are Christians. So when I say we Christians,
I'm a Christian myself too.
Okay, so we believe that God created heaven and earth, and at the beginning, the earth was filled with voids and darkness. So when we check the Bible, always Christians, we use the Bible as our source. So everything is from the Bible. So right now I'm speaking from the Bible. So when we check the Torah, that is the book of Moses, Genesis chapter 1, it says that in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. The earth was filled with darkness and void. So God called light. It came. So from this, it means that God commanded all these things for them to come into existence. So creation was as a result of command. Yes.
And God said, let there be light, let there be this, one district, yes, one factory, one giraffe, one antelope, and then it happened.
That is why we believe that we Christians, God has the supernatural power. He has the ability to command everything. That is our belief.
Sure.
All these are and we all believe in the Bible. So the main basis of our Christian faith is from the Bible.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Master Ernest Ekuoko. That's an interesting submission. I consider that submission quite valuable to the progress of this class, and I might be dashing you some 2 billion marks. So look forward to that. Thank you. Anyone else, last person to share from the Christian perspective, in addition to what Ernest has said? You might be interested in providing some elaborations that Ernest did not touch on, so we move on. Anyone else, Christian perspective? Just raise up your hand and I'll call you. Or you can just turn on your microphone and start speaking. Guys, I think you lost me, right? Hello, can you guys hear me? I think you lost me.
Yes.
I'm being told persistently that my internet connection is unstable. Let me switch to my personal data because I don't try the school Wi-Fi. All right, can you hear me? Anybody can just indicate if I'm audible enough, you can hear me.
Yes, sir, please, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Now.
All right, thank you very much for the feedback, and that will be it all. So I was asking for the next person to share from a Christian perspective, in addition to what Ernest. What is the story behind the origin of life from a Christian perspective? What could have been the role of an omnipotent God, according to the Christian account? No one else. So can you get to the Islamic perspective? In Islam, according to Islam, how did life evolve? How did creation go from special creation? I have, I don't know if I can pronounce the name right, but I'm trying enough. Akampoi Andrews. Andrews.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
From the Christian perspective, it's believed that a supernatural being, which we call our God, created heaven and then earth, and he commanded all other things into it. That is all about Christian creation.
Is there any evidence to
about
this?
the origin of life? They believe that is
Andrews.
how the life came into being.
Andrews. Andrews. Hello, Andrews. Looks like you're not hearing me, but I was asking if there is any specific evidence to that. But I can see Afari Emmanuel. You also have your hand up. Let's hear from you, Emmanuel. Emmanuel. Emmanuel Afari. Well, I think Emmanuel is not responsive, but I'd also want to hear from the Islamic perspective and all that. But whatever be the case, So whenever anybody is ready, you can just raise up your hand, I'll call you. But whatever be the case, what is worthy of notice is that all the major religions in the world have their own account of the origin of life. But the point is, the origin of life represents a single truth of how life appeared on earth. By logic, it is intuitive to notice that we couldn't have had multiple ways for which life started. And so certainly what we can tell is that one of those accounts is valid and all other accounts are wrong. However, the problem we are faced with is a problem that is quite complicated because we are unable to independently verify which of those accounts is true. Why? Because those accounts do not provide any evidence in the first place. So when the Christian perspective posits that God created heaven and earth in 6 days, rested on the seventh day, created this, that, commanded everything into being, there is no single evidence to point out to how exactly that happened and how anybody can independently verify that. And so in a scope of science, where we are interested in pointing out evidence and verifying thoughts in order to establish ideas, it becomes very difficult to accept theories like the Christian account, the Islamic account, and any other account of special creation. That's an important thing to notice. So it becomes very difficult to verify that through scientific inquiry. And so scientists began on an expedition to find more logical means of explaining how these things happen. That's what introduces us to the other theories that we've been looking about. But in the absence of anybody to give an account on the others, notice that, like I said, all the major religions in the world have their own account on creation. So for example, if you look at Indian Buddhist tradition, they believe that the Almighty God himself was called Brahma. And Brahma, who was capable of all things, spearheaded the creation of the earth and all that. This my connection is quite seriously unstable, but let's hope it takes us through.
Please, I can't
for
hear.
example, if you go to India, in Buddhist tradition, they think the Almighty God himself, who is called Brahma, was the one who spearheaded creation in that particular regard. Islamic accounts slightly deviates from the Christian account when it gets to, for example, the creation of man. While the Islamic tradition says there is a sperm drop getting to form a clot of blood and all that, Christian accounts talks about something radically. The body was created, God himself breathed a living breath into Adam, and there God formed, and then took a rib out of him to create Eve and all that. If you listen to some accounts from African traditional religions, God himself, who is Chedi Kwame, who made all of these things into being, lived quite closer to us, and there was one of his creations who used to pound fufu and all of those things and continuously hit God, and then God moved far away. Those are all interesting submissions that an attempt to explain our being can lead you to. But in all of those considerations, recognize that the theory of special creation, as posited by major religions of the world, tells us that creation is proposed by a supernatural power. So creation is the act of an omnipotent God. And according to, for example, the Christian belief, God has created the universe, the planet, animals, plants, and humans in 6 days. Similar beliefs are also proposed by other religions as well. And they are all believing that the theory of special creation is true in their perspective. But there are core and fundamental issues that you need to realize about the theory of special creations. One, according to the theory of special creations, you will be convinced to believe that all living organisms were created on the same day. And so there couldn't have been anything like evolution. They say if the dog was created on the 5th day, it was that day it was created. And so nothing like evolution could have been a gradual process leading to the formation of the current day organisms. And so human beings could not have evolved through early primates because God created humans in our same form as we are now. That is one important thing you need to note about the theories of special creation, that all living forms were created on the same day. They look exactly as they are when they were created in that particular day. And so no changes have occurred significantly at all in a way of evolution. But secondly, they say that there were no, so I talked about first, they were created in the present form. Second, they were created in the same day. But thirdly, the bodies and organs are fully developed to meet the requirements to run their life. And so they have significant adaptations to survive and make life possible. That's another thing that the theory of special creation tells us. And that's important. But notice that irrespective of which religion is a proponent of which strand of special creation theory, there are fundamental objections that scientists and people have always raised as logical contest to those ideas. One of it is that the theory is purely religious-based and faith-based, such that it does not give us any opportunity to independently verify or interrogate any of the ideas expressed by those theories. And so in the Christian account of creation, you just have to believe it by faith as an act of an omnipotent God whose deeds are not even supposed to be questioned. Much more, his deeds are not even supposed to be understood because he's a complex and all-powerful being. So you can't even make an attempt to understand him in the first place. And so you dare not even try to understand how creation happened. And so it is purely religious, based on religious belief. That's one thing that is an objection to scientific acceptance of the special creation theory. Scientists are not able to embrace it because of this. But secondly, there is no experimental evidences at all, no experimental evidence in human history to support any of the assumptions in any form that is being proposed by any special creation there is in the world. No, absolutely no experimental evidence has been produced by any special creation account, not at all. Thirdly, the age of different fossils prove that living organisms appeared on Earth at different time frames. And so scientific inquiry through paleontology, the study of prehistoric life by studying fossils in rocks and all that, tells us that life has evolved in different times and different organisms appeared on Earth different times based on what the fossil records show and what the ages of those fossils in radioactive dating tell us. Okay, so in your SHS life, you got to be introduced to radioactive dating or carbon-14 dating. And if you discover any fossil, we can be able to discover the age of that fossil. The fossil records do indicate that life appeared on Earth at different points in time. And that is not consistent with the special creation theories that suggest that all life appeared at the same time in their present form, absolutely no changes at all in that particular regard. Somebody's hand was up, and you may ask a question if you have any. Yeah, Daniel.
Please, I wanted to know if they found any fossil, like any fossil to support when human beings evolved on it.
All right, we'll get to that part, but there's incredible discovery of a lot of fossils to indicate when tetrapods evolved and trace the evolutionary history from tetrapods to the present man. But even before the present man, like we said, humans are the fifth ape. We have from the first ape to the fourth ape. All of those evidences are there, and they provide some consistency in the line of scientific thinking. And so those evidences are present. However, I should be quick to admit that the fossil record is not complete, for example, for humans, but scientists still make strides to discover a lot of them. But some significant discoveries of some fossils have been breakthroughs in scientific inquiry. For example, you can read about the fossil called Lucy. It gave a lot of clue about the evolution of man. The fossil called Lucy. Another fossil called Tiktaalik. That fossil Tiktaalik is a fish that has legs to be able to walk, and that establishes when fishes first moved from water and how their evolutionary history would form the present day mammals at the end of the day. Then the fossil history, Lucy, also gives an incredible history about the evolution of men. But there are other fossils that also give a lot of records. But notice that the fossil record is not complete. However, there's a few organisms that have a complete fossil record. You can arrange them from start to finish. An example is the Equus, which is the horse. The present day horse has a complete fossil record, and you can trace from start to finish. And that gives incontrovertible evidence of its evolution. I don't know if you're satisfied with the answer. In the absence of any follow-up question, I'll move on. Daniel.
I'm satisfied.
All right, thank you, Daniel. So these are the reasons why we are unable as a scientific community to accept the theories of special creation. One, because it is purely based on religious beliefs and not evidence-based. Secondly, absolutely no experimental proof or evidence whatsoever has been attempted throughout human civilization to explain any account of special creation. But thirdly, the fossil records are telling us a different story. So in the absence of any question, let's move from the theory of special creation to some other theory of autogenesis, proposed by the man Plato, Aristotle, and the central principle of the theory of autogenesis. I think let me ask that question. What is the central principle behind the theory of autogenesis? Autogenesis. What is the central principle? What central idea does that theory propose? Theory of autogenesis. Anyone? Somebody says, Daniel Yaza, you didn't get a second fossil book. Well, I wasn't mentioning books of fossils. I was mentioning examples of very significant fossils that have been discovered. And when we say fossils, they are just evidence of past life. So they can be tools that were used by early men. They can be bones of dead organisms buried and preserved in rocks for millions of years. and they tell us a lot about our own origin of life in that particular area. And I said one important fossil you should read about is a fossil called Lucy, Lucy. Another fossil is a fossil called Tiktaalik that you should. I have an indication that some people have their hands raised up, and so let's hear from Akwaboah Evans.
So the theory of autogenesis.
From last week's lecture, you had a lot of fans when you had a question. Are you that popular in the class?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. You go ahead.
So as the name suggests, auto means self, and genesis means beginning of. So autogenesis is like self-generation of life. So life came from nowhere. So that's all about
life came from nowhere.
Yeah, from nowhere.
Can you just break down that further?
So it just appeared from non-living substance or spontaneous coming up of life.
All right, thank you very much, Master Akwaboah Evans. And I can see some other hands up. Master Samuel Agri. Agri, you are in Group B and you are in this class. Tomorrow you should come again, otherwise you score 0. But let's hear from you regardless. Agri.
The theory of autogenesis.
Yeah, but you are in Group B, right?
No, I mean Group A is a mistake.
But in your name, could it be a mistake in your name? Because I have underscore.
Yeah, it's a mistake. I'm going to correct.
All right, so it will be in your interest to correct that. But let's hear from you on what you have to say about autogenesis.
The theory of autogenesis stated that life spontaneously was generated from non-living substance. So Aristotle believed that maggots can grow from, let's say, rotten meat. So maggots can generate from rotten meat without it being caused by anything. But it was later on disproved.
All right. So thank you very much. The fact that we are discussing these theories is not a validation that any of those theories are true. We can have an independent discussion on which of the theories sounds more credible based on the available scientific evidence we have today. It is important, however, to discuss these theories to see how far we've come as a scientific community in our way of thinking and how knowledge has been discovered to the present day. We also do anticipate that we might be having some groundbreaking discoveries in the future, which will radically shape our understanding of the origin of life. Maybe this is just the beginning. But theory of autogenesis, otherwise known as the theory of spontaneous generation of life. Just like your friends have said, this theory speaks to spontaneous generation or abiogenesis, and ultimately assumes that non-living materials in a spontaneous manner were able to give rise to life. And there are a lot of fundamental ideas that influence this kind of thinking by proponents such as Plato and Aristotle, some of the greatest minds that ever lived in human civilization. In ancient Greek, they're able to propose this based on these observations. One of those observations ultimately was that the hair of horsetail, when dipped in water, was able to give rise to horsetail or horsehair worms called gordius. That's one of the reasons why they felt life can evolve from non-living things spontaneously, because when you dip a horsetail in water and create a moist condition, horsetail worms begin to evolve, to emerge. So they think they have appeared spontaneously from nowhere. Also, lava is able to develop on rotten meat. The same way, if you put anything there and housefly comes to step on it, they say the housefly dumps its larvae on it or lays eggs on it, whatever, and then a short time, you see a few days time, you see maggots growing. The maggots are the larvae of the housefly, and does not in any way suggest that the maggots have come from nowhere. Today we know that, but those guys, smart guys, did not know that at that point in time. Third thing is that in ancient Egypt, it was believed that frogs, snakes, and crocodiles in the mud of Nile could evolve or could emerge when the river was warmed from the sun. So when the sun shines a lot, then crocodiles, frogs, snakes, and other reptiles are able to emerge from the river Nile. Meanwhile, some of these creatures are cold-blooded, and so they need to come out when the sun shines in that particular respect. And sometimes when it shines so well and they want to come out and feel some fresh air or even move out of the water in that particular area, that does not suggest at all, because the mud gets hot. So that does not suggest that it came from the mud. But all of these influence their thinking. Also, Van Helmont claimed that he could produce mice from dirty shirts and a hatful of wheat grains when kept in the dark cupboard for 3 weeks. Van Helmont, one of the greatest minds at that time, also thought that way, that he could produce mice from dirty shirts and a handful of wheat grains when left in a dark cupboard for 3 weeks. So all these kind of things influence the thinking of scientists like Aristotle and Plato to believe that life spontaneously can generate from somewhere. I'm going to throw back this question to you. How do we criticize these ideas that informed the theory of spontaneous generation or autogenesis? And what are the available scientific authority that settle the score on this idea to disprove that? When I get your contributions, and if they touch on everything, I would move on. If they don't, then I will speak on 3 important scientists who adequately provided concrete scientific evidence to disprove this idea. So let's get back to you. How do we critique this idea of spontaneous generation? Is it a sensible idea based on our knowledge today? And what are the shortcomings and what are the possible lapses that these great men were lost on? So I'm going to mention a few names, but I recognize that Ernest, your hand is up. I'll come back to you, but let me mention a few names. Miss Jessica John, let's hear from you. And I told you guys that if I mention your name and you don't respond, it means you are not present. That must count.
Please,
for
I'm present.
All right, so let's hear from you, Miss Jessica John. What do you think? And when I ask you a question, you're not obligated to provide a scientific theory. You just have to be frank with what you think about it, have an open-minded assessment, and there's never a wrong answer in this class. You would always add up to what you know, and always you will get better at the end of the day. So let's hear from you. Jessica. Jessica, I'm waiting for you.
Please, which of the Jessicas?
The one I mentioned, she knows herself. Jessica John.
Please, I didn't get the question. But
I'm sure you should be getting what we discussed about And also, you guys should notice this. If I ask you a question and you don't get a question, it tells a lot about what you were doing just before your name was mentioned. And so I won't be in the business of repeating questions, but for the sake of Jessica, this be the first time I'm saying that, let me repeat it for you. You heard about the conversation about autogenesis and spontaneous generation of life as a theory. What I'm saying is that give a criticism about this particular theory. What do you think is a shortcoming of this theory based on what we know today? Do you think it's an incredible idea? Do you think they were not thinking right? And what can you say about it? Like, just briefly. Or you did not hear about the discussion on autogenesis at all?
No, please.
And that's an indication that you're not paying attention. That's what counts for something. Next person.
Please, I was paying attention.
Don't worry, Jessica. I've already taken notice of that. Next person is Stephanie Ousu. Miss Stephanie Ousu.
Hello. Sir.
Yes, Steph.
Okay. Please, from what I understood from the discussion, you
Annie,
said,
can you come again? Your line is breaking.
Please, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay. Please, from my understanding on what we have discussed so far, you said the autolysis, like
autogenesis.
Autogenesis in the beginning. Some of these scientists understood that something like sports meat, things like worms can evolve from it, which like now we have gotten to know that it is not true.
Yeah, so what do you think generally about that idea? Do you think it should still be taken seriously, and if not, on what basis?
Okay, to me, I think it makes sense it makes sense in some aspects, right?
Yeah, as Stanley, as a scientist, you wouldn't leave any part of your explanation blank. You say it makes sense in some aspects. So we will be interested to know which aspects you think it makes sense and which aspects you think it doesn't.
To me, I think it makes sense.
It makes sense completely. Is that your submission?
Please, can you hear me? No, please. I said it makes sense, but not. It makes sense, but not.
Yeah. So we will be interested to know in which instance it makes sense, in which instance it doesn't make sense. Stanley, are you there?
Hello.
Yeah.
Please, I'm sorry, the network wasn't stable.
Go ahead, we have you now.
Okay. So to me, I think for something like, let's say you put, let's say sugar is at a particular point.
I think you have a bad connection, Stanley. So let's make it another time. But I can also see B indicated to your name. I don't know if you're in group B or you're in group A.
Hello.
Yeah, Steph, are you in group B or A?
Please, I'm in group B.
You're in group B. And so is it your submission that you were not told that it's only group A that's supposed to join the class today?
Yes, please, I'm not aware of that.
You are not aware of that? So,
no, please.
It means that you actually also joined the class late, because at the beginning of the class, I did indicate clearly. And I think the class rep also communicated that clearly. But notice that I don't have a problem with you joining or any other person in Group B joining today's class. But today's class is for people in Group A. So if you're in Group B and you have joined today, tomorrow respectfully attend the class again, because that's when you get to be marked for attendance correctly and get the marks. So next time, if you're in B and we say this session is for A, do not come. So those people in A who have made up their mind to join the Bs tomorrow, they will all score 0, because those people, they don't have any opportunity to come and attend the class today because they are not here. But for those of you who are in B who have decided to come today so you can come tomorrow, at least you have the opportunity to come again tomorrow. I don't have a problem if you want to attend the tutorial twice, but at all costs, you must attend the particular tutorial that is meant for your group. All right, so that goes to everybody B who is here. I have a couple of hands up. Let's hear from Ekuamwa, Miss. Ekuya, we are listening to you. Ekuya, it appears that you are speaking, but unfortunately we are unable to hear you. Nothing at all. If Ekuya is not getting on, let's get to Daniel again. Dan.
Yes, sir. Please, with the theory of spontaneous generation, the first person who gave the first blow to this theory was Francisco Reddy, and then I also remember Luis Pasteur, like he
so
proved
let's stay on Francisco Reddy. What did Reddy say?
Like I don't remember much about,
but I remember that.
The name.
But you know, Francisco and Pastor gave their opposition to this theory and disproved it, right? You know that. That's cool. That's cool. Can anybody tell us what Francisco Reddy, Louis Pasteur, and Spallanzani did in disproving this theory of abiogenesis?
He's Baku.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm back again. I think you guys lost me. I'm facing the most terrible internet connectivity in human history.
Daniel Baopoku, you are now the host too.
Let me get something rectified. I think when I joined the game, I've lost the host right to Daniel Baopoku, who absolutely is not even paying attention to whatever is going on. Let me get that rectified from the other machine.
All right, sir.
No.
Hey, GK, focus and stop fooling.
Andrews. Hey, Andrews.
Who is calling me?
Yo, GK. GK.
Tell me about Michael.
GK, how are you? Well, me too. Huh?
Please, guys, please. The TA is here, please.
All right, guys, I'm back with the hosting rights. The guy who apparently became the host, I don't think was even aware of anything. We had been largely oblivious of what's going on. But I hope everybody can hear me clearly now.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yes, sir, you can hear you.
All right, fine. That's cool. So I was talking about the theory of autogenesis, that's spontaneous generation of life. And that has been proposed by Plato and Aristotle. We are at a point where we were discussing critiques to this theory. And notice that the central principle behind that theory is that life can originate spontaneously from non-living substances. For example, if, how do you call it? You put a horse tail in water, you see horse tail worms developing from it. So the horse tail has produced worms and it has produced life. When you put a fly larvae are able to develop on rotten meat, and so out of rotten meat, life can develop, like things like that. There are incredible scientific experiments that sought to disprove this idea. And let's talk about those quickly from three perspectives. Three major scientists independently conducted studies to disprove these this line of thinking. And one of them was Francesco Redi. And Francesco Redi did a very conclusive and well-designed experiment to disprove the theory of spontaneous generation. He placed meat and fishes in 3 separate jars. Jar number 1 was left open, jar number 2 was covered with gauze, and the third one was covered with paper. He put meat or fish decayed in all 3 jars, and he attracted flies. So when he put meat in all the 3 jars, notice that one of them was left open, one of them was covered with a gauze, the one they used to cover wounds. One of them was covered with paper. It happened that all of the meat or fish that were placed in all of the 3 jars underwent, they all underwent decay. And so decay took place, and that happened. And they attracted flies because of the pungent smells that are produced from decay. It's important to notice that in jar number 1, the flies entered and laid eggs, which eventually gave birth to new larvae. And so you saw maggots growing on it, which were obviously the larval stage of flies. If your microphone is on, you know what to do. So notice that jar number 1, with jar number 1, flies entered and laid eggs, which eventually gave birth to new larvae. And so maggots ended up developing because of the fact that houseflies got to lay eggs on it because it was left open. In jar number 2, flies did not, and they couldn't enter, and no larvae was formed or found inside the jar. That's because they blocked the entry. However, the flies laid eggs on the gauze, which produced the larvae on top of it. So you couldn't see the maggots, which is the larval stage of a fly, inside the jar, but on top of the gauze that was used to cover it. And that's important to note. However, at the end of this experiment, Francesco Redi was able to conclusively decide that organisms arise from pre-existing organisms rather than non-living things. So it couldn't have been the case, ladies and gentlemen, that the larvae or the maggots were produced out of nothing or from the meat, which was a non-living thing. They were produced because houseflies came to land, then laid eggs, and the eggs hatched into larvae, and the maggots were the larval stage of the houseflies. So that is a great disproof to that idea of autogenesis. Another scientist who did a similar thing to disprove, Spallanzani, in his experimental setup, he designed that experiment to test for the validity of the theory of spontaneous generation. In this experiment, Spallanzani had prepared animal or vegetable broth, which was boiled, and he boiled them for several hours, and either remained open or sealed immediately. So that's what he did. Broth that was made up of animal or vegetables, and for some of the broth, he kept the seal open, and some of them closed them immediately. Now let's see what happened. He concluded that high temperature boiling had killed all microorganisms, and in the absence of microorganisms, life could not appear. Because the reason why he was able to make this conclusion is that in all of the broths that were contained in jars that were covered, no microorganisms developed. But those that were uncovered, microorganisms developed. And so it could not have been the case that microorganisms appeared from nothing. Then they should have appeared also from the broth that was covered. And so that was how he was able to disprove the idea of spontaneous generation. You can read more on these experiments. I talked about Francesco Redi, I talked about Spallanzani. And the last person to disprove the autogenesis theory is Louis Pasteur. In his experiments, in another conclusive manner, Pasteur designed an experimental flag with curved tube. He took hair infusion in the flax and boiled for several minutes. After cooling, the stem condensed into the lower part of the tube to act as a barrier to stop the entry of microorganisms. No life, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely no life appeared in the flax for several months. Analysis of the condensed water indicates the appearance of microorganisms in the neck of the tube. Breaking the S tube now allowed the growth of microorganisms. So the tube was so long that when the water condensed, they blocked the tube for any organism getting entry into the main flask. Several months, no microbe evolved. However, when he broke the neck of the tube, which was quite long and S-shaped, microorganisms began to develop. I've moved through this quite quickly because we have to talk about a lot of other theories, but you can independently go and watch videos on each of these experiments. 1 by Francesco Redi, 2 by Spallanzani, 3 by Louis Pasteur. And also knows that Louis Pasteur is the man behind pasteurization of milk. And that's an important process in food microbiology. Any question up to this point? Guys, any question? Ayensu Stella. Stella.
Sir,
Go ahead.
please, can you go over the Louis experiment?
Louis Pasteur. Unfortunately, I'm unable to do that because I want to move to the rest. But it's you let me attempt doing that. So this is what Louis Pasteur does. He takes a flask with a very long neck, which is S-shaped, and heats a substance in it for a very long time, such that all the microorganisms in it are dead. So the water in the contents evaporates. And when it evaporates and moves through the long neck of the flask, it gets condensed and forms water. And the water blocks that tube, which is the long neck of the flask, such that it serves as a barrier for any microorganism not to be able to pass through that water medium and then end up in the flask. You get it? And when he did this, he was able to keep the contents of the flask for several months without any microbial infestation. However, in the same experiment, when he decided to break the such that there was open space, microorganisms started developing. But I've said that you can always Google or search a video on YouTube on Louis Pasteur's experiments to disprove the spontaneous generation of life. And you have an incredible video that shows you this truth throughout this process. So we can move on regardless. Stella, are you okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. I think someone else had a hand up. There's no hand up as it stands now. So let's move to the theory of catastrophism. We've talked about special creation. We talked about spontaneous generation of life. Let's look at catastrophism. And this theory was proposed by Cuvier in 1776. And that was when I was a young man. In 1776 was a very interesting time. The basic idea or the central principle behind this theory of catastrophism is that life originated due to sudden changes on Earth. Let me try as much as possible to try to summarize this theory. But notice that this theory of catastrophism by Cuvier is an extension of the theory of special creation. The theory ultimately is assuming that life originated by the creation as in special creation that we know. And it is followed by catastrophe due to geological disturbances and changes in the earth. And each catastrophe or change in the earth, for example, mass extinction, earthquakes, those kind of catastrophes, each catastrophe destroyed the life completely, whereas creation forms life different from the previous one. Hence, each round of catastrophe or creation is responsible for the evolvement or evolution of different types of organisms on Earth. This sounds quite interesting. He's a scientist, but however, he believes that the theory of special creation is true. However, when special creation happens and life forms are created, he believes catastrophic events such as the mass extinction or very gigantic earthquakes can be able to wipe out all the life that exists on Earth. And when all those lives disappear, new lives are being formed again through special creation. And those new life forms that are formed through special creation are different from the previous ones. So he seemingly tries to believe in the idea that unlike the special creation that says life forms that we see today have been the same since the beginning of time, he thinks that no, life forms we see today are different from the previous ones before the last catastrophic events. And so somewhat he believes evolution does happen, but he doesn't think evolution is through a natural process of self-sustaining journeys. He thinks it's still due to the intervention of a special creator in that particular area. Notice that the criticism to this current theory is the same as the previous one of special creation. No specific experiment to support this hypothesis, and has been largely based on broad sweeping imagination, which cannot be substantiated or empirically verified under any independent circumstance. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot take that seriously. Except that you need to know. Any question on catastrophism? But also try to read more on these theories. Read more on them. Any question, guys? In the absence of no question, what's the next theory? We talked about autogenesis, talked about special creation, talked about catastrophism. Let's look at the cosmozoic theory. Cosmozoic theory. And this theory was proposed by Richard in 1865. Richard in 1865 and Helmont. Von Helmont
Please. Please, I can't hear you.
Hey, we can't hear anything. No.
Someone else is posting.
Also,
guys, I'm back again. I told you that I'm facing one of the most terrible connections in human civilization. But we shall still be able to continue. Now, someone else is the host, Daniel Ba Opoku. Are you here? Daniel? Oh, Daniel is connected, absolutely not paying attention. And he's now the host. All right, I think everyone will largely comport themselves, so I don't need to go back to the main system and make myself the host again. Let's hope that we'll be able to finish within a short time that is left. So we got to the Cosmozoic theory, and notice that the Cosmozoic theory is also known as the theory of panspermia. And this theory says that life originated somewhere else in the cosmos. And when we say the cosmos, it's the same as the universe. And you know the universe is different from the earth. You guys should get the difference. There is the universe, which is the entirety of everything, the universal set. And then in the universe, there are several galaxies of stars. And a number of galaxies of stars come together to form a system. So let's say a galaxy. One of the galaxies, which is not even the biggest galaxy, one of the smallest galaxies, and guess what? I went off again. Oh, after this whole thing, I have to sue NTN. I mean, this is terrible. The internet I paid for. All right, so I was talking about the fact that the Cosmozoic theory, or the theory of panspermia, says that life was formed from somewhere in the cosmos and got introduced on Earth because Earth has favorable conditions for the flourishing of life. But then the question is, if life was formed in the form of spores from somewhere, why couldn't it have flourished at wherever it was formed? And what was the precursor of that particular spore formation? And the precursor that begot that particular spore, couldn't it had life in itself? And what is the story about that particular life? Because you can't say the spores came out of nothing. All of these are interesting criticisms. But I was in the process of explaining to you that the cosmos or the universe is a bigger place than what a lot of people think. Normally, when you say the universe, people think the Earth. But I was trying to create a mental picture to you that the universe is the universal set. In the universe, you have a lot of stars, and stars come together to form galaxies. So a galaxy will be made up of several billions to trillions of stars. One of the galaxies in the cosmos is the Milky Way galaxy. It's not one of the biggest galaxies. It's an averagely sized galaxy called the Milky Way galaxy, made with about a few billions of stars. The Milky Way galaxy has planets, and our Earth is one of the 8 planets revolving around the central star of the Milky Way galaxy. So the sun is one of the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So our sun is a star in of itself. And the sun is not even one of the biggest stars in the cosmos. Even in the Milky Way galaxy, it's not one of the biggest stars. In fact, the stars you see in the evening, which are blue, are bigger, far, far, far bigger and hotter and brighter than the sun. The theory is that blue stars are the biggest and brightest. Yellow stars like our sun are in between, and red stars are less bright. So our sun is just a medium size and medium brightness and heat. So in the Milky Way galaxy, the billions of stars, our sun is just one of them. And then it forms planets around, 8 planets. Our Earth is also not one of the biggest planets. Jupiter, for example, that has 12 moons, Neptune that has 8 moons. Our Earth can manage just 1 moon. So it can tell you how big our own Earth as a planet is. So when we say the universe, you should picture it as an incredibly big space. So we say life was formed somewhere in the cosmos, in the universe, probably outside the Milky Way galaxy, and came to Earth and found favorable conditions and began to flourish. This obviously is some piece of nonsense. So like I said, the theory was put forward by Richard and strongly supported by Arrhenius. And the theory assumes that life was present from resistant spores that appeared on Earth from other planets. Since the condition on Earth was supporting life, the spores grew and evolved into different organisms. This theory was proposed and known to be the theory of panspermia or spore theory. The theory initially got the support from the fact that fossils of microorganisms were found in meteorites in 1961. And this is an incredible piece of history. In 1961, scientists discovered some fossils of early life in meteorites. And that probably gave them indication that something about life might have occurred even in other places of the universe outside the Earth in that particular time. But no mechanism or explanation of the process about the transfer of the spores has been made at all. In the absence of life forms from any other planets except the Earth, and no details about the spores, its origin and mechanisms of crossing the interplanetary space and reaching the Earth, is a huge flaw to this particular theory. Also, in addition, recognize that the theory does not add much to the fundamental details about origin of life. No scientific experiments were given to support the theory, and as a result, the hypothesis did not receive and continues not to receive any significant attention. And it's as simple as it is. You can't take it serious until there is convincing evidence. But guys, notice that the fact that we think things do not support the available scientific evidence does not suggest that those things cannot be true. Sometimes the majority can be wrong. All these theories we say are wrong might probably be true, because cosmozoic theory, for instance, has not been disproven. Just that there's no evidence or experiment to support it. Unlike autogenesis, which has been disproven, that one is dead. But something like cosmozoic theory, nobody has disproved it, but the proponents have not been able to prove it themselves. So those ones should be looked at very well. I'm mindful of these things because, for example, if you look at my WhatsApp status today, I shared a piece of letter that was written in 1907. And this was a letter from University of Bern it was written to Albert Einstein on the 6th of June, 1907. And this is what the letter reads. Your application for doctorate has not been successful at this time, and such that you are not eligible to the position of associate professor. While you posed an interesting theory in the article published in the Annalen de Physique, we feel that your conclusions about the nature of light and the fundamental connection between space and time are somewhat radical. Overall, we find your assumptions to be more artistic than actual physics. Sincerely yours, Professor Willis Henrich, the Dean of Sciences at Bern University. Ladies and gentlemen, this letter was written to Albert Einstein in June 6, 1907, rejecting his application to pursue doctorate degree in that particular university, on grounds that his theory of relativity, what that article that actually was developed into the theory of relativity was not convincing. It was radical, and see the words that they describe it, that it was more artistic than real physics. So several years later, this theory of relativity will become the groundbreaking and transforming principle in physics. And Einstein will go ahead to become arguably the greatest scientist of the 20th century, just because of the theory of relativity. So sometimes we still can have doubts based on available evidence, but some radical ideas can be true. Any question up to this stage? Guys, is there any question up to this stage? You can just raise up your hand and speak. All right, I don't think there is any question. I told you originally you're going to talk about 6 theories. We've done 4. We are left with the theory of conservation and the theory of organic evolution, i.e. Lamarckism and Darwinism. The progress of this course would draw inspiration continuously from Lamarckism and Darwinism. And so I'm hoping that we'll still get a lot of engagement to understand those two theories better. However, I would urge you to do further reading on the theory of conservation. And that was by Howden and Oparin. And that's basically saying that life originated from inorganic substances in a sequential stages, like step-by-step process. That's what Oparin said in that particular theory. I would not like to start anything new because we're fast running out of time. Let's regress about a few minutes more. Now, let's pay attention to the following announcements. First, recognize that in a few minutes to hours, you will get ready in your hands the course materials, the PDF. I'll send the first batch. Notice that you get series of them. So in total, you get up to like probably over 1,500 slides. And that's fine. So I'll send the first batch today. But most importantly, notice that you're supposed to do a work after every tutorial or lab. This is a tutorial. Last week was a tutorial. Sometimes you do lab. And we've been told that that's what constitutes your 30%. I give reasonable time for the work. And so we realized that we met last week, Monday. I think I posted a work on Tuesday or Wednesday morning. I think it's Tuesday that I posted it. Tuesday evening or afternoon, probably, that I posted it. And when I posted it on Tuesday, I gave you a reasonable deadline. Up to Monday. Ordinarily, I should have taken it on Friday. I gave you up to Monday. Monday too, I gave you up to 10 a.m. However, this morning, a lot of you constantly were calling. I can't submit, I have problems and all those things. See, relax. All of those things, I have done some before. I've been a student before. There are a few of you who genuinely have technical issues submitting. We think those technical issues with submission can be hugely prevented if you do an early submission. If for some reasons you are not able to do an early submission and you're experiencing technical issues with submission, kindly try a different device, and that might do fine for you.